Hello teachers, my name is Aiden Bentley or Mr. Bentley, and I took some time to teach a student using algebra tiles. I spent some time planning, and then I taught the lesson, and then I took some time to reflect, and I hope this is of value for you guys as you go about getting ready to teach. So I taught Micah Sessions. He's one of my friends from college. I'd known he had some experience with algebra, so I just had an indirect assessment. We kind of talked through how did he learn, how did he understand some of the definitions, and then I asked expanding questions as needed. It was a great way for me to see where he was at, and then it was a great way for me to see kind of where his misconceptions might be, especially as we looked at a visual way to represent them, like algebra tiles. And it only took about 5 to 10 minutes. Then I explained how we were going to teach and taught using the algebra tiles, where we would build it, we would explain it, and then solve it abstractly. And then as questions or comments were needed, things to be clarified, we went about that. So the first one I did was solving linear equations that involve two operations. So here we see the multiplying of x, and then we also see the addition and subtraction of the constants. I also chose this equation as an opportunity for students to see the variable on both sides. Especially in earlier equations, teachers will have a tendency of just having x on the left side, but students need to get comfortable with seeing it on both sides because it exists on both sides. When shifting from expressions to equations, I would recommend a scale visual where the students can see that you have one side and that is in fact equal to the other side. And then you can either solve by adding the 6x or adding the 2x, but depending, it'll give you an opportunity to see the variable on both sides. The next equation that I did was combining like terms. In the future, I would start with this, but I knew from my work with the student on expressions and then my pre-assessment that the student knew how to combine like terms. But when you solve, you get 3x equals 0 and then x equals 0. Using the algebra tiles, it might be a little tricky because when we see, like in the last example, we had an x and that can cover up so many units on the right side as we use our scale visual. But it might be a little bit trickier to show how x can equal 0. So my student recommended physically trying to drag out 0 units to try to show students how each of the x's in fact covering 0. Then we solved linear equations using distributive property. My student struggled with this. He had 3 single units and then an x and then 2 negative units, and then on his right side he had the -6. I used a simpler example of 3 times 4 and had him kind of talk through it. He was like, well, there's 3 groups, 3 sets of 4. I was like, okay, so how would he show that with having 3 groups of x minus 2? And from there, he was able to visualize that and show it using his algebra tiles of having x minus 2, x minus 2, x minus 2. And from there, we were able to solve just fine. Then we multiplied two binomials. You can see the visual I used on the bottom of just using whole numbers of 24 and 16. Where you can break apart the 24 into 20 and 4 and the 16 into 10 and 6. And I use this example for the student, that way he could see how we can have the smaller areas and find those areas, and then the sum of those areas would be the total areas of the 24 and the 16. And from there we were able to use that using the binomials. And I use the array model here as well. Yep. And then so you can do the 3x minus 2 up top, and then the 2x minus 4 down the side. And then you can see x times x, well, that gets an x squared. And from there, we were able to solve, and the student was able to see that clear visual. He explained how he had learned FOIL, but it wasn't a good method, and he didn't like it. He thought of it as having the first term and multiplying it by the other terms, which is a little bit closer and better to the math that's actually involved. And it's a great way as we shift from two binomials to having trinomials and even larger sets. Reflecting, I know I've reflected quite a bit throughout the video, but a few just keynotes is to expect to go slow. I think I was expecting it to take about 45 minutes, and I think that's about how long it took. But you definitely need to go slow and focus on the math language that you're using. The student was like, he adds 6 and it goes away. It's like, no, it doesn't go away. What's happening is you're making 0 pairs. And then the students might want to jump to abstract, so make sure that that visual is solid. And then the student also recommended stressing integer understanding of adding -4 is the same as subtracting +4. Use several examples for the students because this will help develop their understanding, and have fun because the students will enjoy the math, and when you enjoy it, they will too.